And over in the bottom left-hand side of the map, we have the blue blue Protoss player. It is Nina. It's funny because you just mentioned we don't really know always where to rate JonSnow, and I feel like it's really accurate because I feel as though sometimes he'll show up to an event and he'll just kind of get bopped in a sort of silly way, and I'm like, oh, JonSnow, come on, man. I thought higher of you, but you know, I get it. It's not really your focus, and not only that, but you're working now. It's not just like school and pretending like you're actually working, but really you're just playing StarCraft and skipping your classes. Now you have real life commitments, but I think I can speak for this. This is like one of those rare times I can actually speak from experience and it'll be accurate. But when you are going from the transition of school and then you go into the workforce, and JonSnow actually does the same thing as me. He's like a software developer by trade. There's this weird period at the very beginning where you feel like you have no time and work is just sucking up all of your time because you're so focused on trying to blend into work. You're trying to learn everything. And then you kind of settle in. You're like, actually, no, I do have time. I do have time to play StarCraft again. I do have time for all this other stuff. I feel like JonSnow is getting to that point, and I feel like that's why we're starting to see him come back up again.
Okay. I mean, I have no idea about that world, but that sounds hopeful to me. I've always enjoyed watching JonSnow in the past. Of course, when I was covering WCS Premier League in America a long time ago, we always covered JonSnow in the qualifiers and quite often in the main event as well, even when he had to duke it out with the Koreans. And then later on, when things started to region lock, I mean, that was kind of the ultimate JonSnow call. He's like, all right, here we go. Challenger North America, I'm here, right? Like that was kind of his stomping ground. And he would make sure that nobody else was going to get a crack at Neep, Scarlet, or Special. Now, I just don't really know. I do always find it fun to cast his games. In the past, JonSnow had a lot of cheeky early game all-ins as well, right? Not really expecting that kind of stuff. At least not on Pillars of Gold. Maybe on one of the smaller maps. I think we'll have at least one of those in the rotation here. But I guess on this map, we can just kind of see a normal, straight-up game between these two.
Mm-hmm. Now, Nina, on the other hand, going to be opening up with that Stargate, which definitely also screams normal until we see a Fleet Beacon or a fast second Stargate also popping on out. But yeah, Nina, I feel like always been that player for a very long time that has done really well with small, really powerful and highly microable groups of units, putting the pressure on and just kind of throwing her opponents off their game, throwing their opponents' kind of game plans out the window and messing up their micro, messing up their macro with the harassment. So we'll see how well of a job she can actually do with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Nina, her multitasking is excellent, and it's been very good, especially for North American standards for a long time. The adept actually getting picked off there. It's just a single adept, but it's never nice to lose one because with Protoss, you have very few units to work with in the beginning of the game, especially if you play Stargate. So going up to 3 bases, if you lose an adept early on, can become a bit tricky. The Oracle was forced to use Bullseye Beam as well, and I think that's already a nice little victory for JonSnow. Now knows that it's a Stargate and also knows that this Oracle has less energy to work with.
Yeah, it is going to be a second Oracle to follow this up immediately, so not even bothering to go for the really quick Phoenix to follow it up and start sniping off the Overlord. In fact, just going to let that Overlord kind of roam free. Got a lot of Adepts and Oracles on the map. Nothing to actually prevent those Overlords from getting continued scouting and seeing the Robo follow up behind this.
Yep, you can see JonSnow trying to be annoying. Just picking up that probe can actually sometimes slow down this Nexus by quite a bit. Unfortunately for JonSnow, the Adepts were in the right position. You know, earlier on the broadcast, I was giggling because when Silky and Scarlet were ready to play their match, Silky actually said that he thinks the carrier build is really imba. You know, the one where they open up with the 4 carriers and then followed up with a big ground attack. And I thought it was kind of funny. And I think Scarlet dropped a ... where it's like, really? Out of all the things, you think that's the imba build? I don't know. I couldn't forget about it. I just thought it was funny.
I wouldn't mind seeing it once or twice here and there. I feel like Puck has always just been that player that kind of plays to his own rhythm, right? I could see him doing it, but I feel like he wouldn't do it because it was like a new meta thing. He'd just do it because he thought it was something that was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to see a little more of the traditional Zealot Archon, lots of War Prisms coming out of Nina in this series. So far, it's very standard, guys. Doesn't look like any crazy NA game. I gotta say, Ravi, for all the craziness that you promised me when I was going to get some NA StarCraft here for the first time, it's been somewhat normal so far in these 4 best of 3s that we've casted together.
You didn't enjoy the 3-rack Reaper versus the 12 pool? Roddy, come on.
That was fun.
Showing you games you've never seen before.
That was fun, but also stopped being fun very quickly when I realized that Tila was digging his own grave, and I was like, man, this is brutal. Because I think there are some scenarios where Terran can end it immediately, but they can basically do whatever they want. And then it's like, oh, look at this. This is where Terran players are going to show off how good they are with the stutter step micro, and they're going to drop all over the place. And I personally hate those games because Terran players have done that too many times in their life against me. I'm traumatized, Robbie.
Not even fun to watch anymore. Oh, man. Well, JonSnow's going to be remaking all the Overlords he's expecting to lose to the Phoenix. He's already got 3 on the way, but don't
wow.
worry. Nina's over here to free up some of that supply. JonSnow, 8 drones killed off by those 2 Oracles. Very nicely done.
Yeah, JonSnow is just all-inning at this point. I didn't expect an all-in on Pillars of Gold because this map is so freaking big, but all the queens are marching to the other side of the map. We're having a little bit of a creep highway as well with all those dropper lords. So that's kind of cool. The Ravage count is going to be very high. Nina needs to identify that this is happening and then needs to get some shield batteries up. Otherwise, these kind of builds are super difficult to deal with. The batteries are close to finishing up. The Ravage count is so high though, Robbie.
It really is. And that overcharge is finally going to be available. We'll see. Nina decides to drop it down for now, just using the Force Field to try and trap in a couple of these Ravagers, using those Immortals to hit with big firepower. There's the big battery overcharge. Trying to snipe off some more units, but it's a very slow engagement. Neither one of these players really committing that hard just yet. We are finally starting to see Nina actually getting some big force fields and trying to focus fire down Queens. I don't know if Nina actually has enough DPS, but most of the Roaches and Ravagers are starting to get worked through.
I think it's good enough, especially with all these batteries to fall back onto. The Oracles actually did some serious work for Nina as well, just wailing away at those Ravagers, and I don't see these Immortals falling. It's not like a bunch of Zerglings are about to show up and surround them. No, these Immortals will stay strong, and that means that the Queens are going to be in a lot of trouble as well. That Immortal count is at 4 at this point. And while Nina is defending this, she's also up 23 workers at this point. That is a ridiculous amount of workers to be up in this matchup. Amazing hold. Very well done. I thought it was going to be super close, and I gotta say, it wasn't that close in the end.
Yeah, I thought, especially with the Lings flooding in from behind, JonSnow was going to be able to make some headway with the Immortals not really attacking the Roaches or Ravagers. But at the end of the day, the many shield batteries that Nina threw down at the end definitely helped her out. But at this point, yeah, I'm just gradually getting more and more impressed by the fact that Nina was able to probe throughout the entire fight.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, how committed is this Zerg really here? It's like, well, very. You know, there's a creep highway, there are 7 queens on the other side of the map. I gotta say, it's a cliche, right? It's like, wow, the force fields were good, but I actually think the force fields were super spot on. They weren't overkill, but they bought some time for Nina to allow those additional batteries to finish up and just kind of put the Immortals in a good position to always be in range and always fire, but never be in any danger. So I think, honestly, an amazing job with the sentries.
Indeed. Well, Storm is going to be finished up now for Nina. Got another one of these Warp Prisms on its way out. Well, I guess actually first Warp Prism, sorry. So it'll probably be the signal for when Nina would feel comfortable maybe considering moving out. Storm is now finished up, so I guess it probably wants to warp in a few High Templar. Oh, actually, already has 3. So yeah, we'll be really well set up for when that Warp Prism finishes.
The Phoenixes are going to keep track of the army movement of JonSnow as well. That makes it even harder. Nina's going for the double Stargate +1 air weapons. Everybody knows that I'm always a big fan. I actually think this is the kind of game where Nina can keep it simple for herself. Maybe just make a couple of extra gateways, get that prism out on the map and go for it. But hey, making double Stargate Phoenix +1 against a player who's only building Roaches and Ravages, it's hard to disagree with that call.
3 queens off on their own. Funny enough, they don't have a sport call or anything to help support, so Phoenix maybe could have taken that on, but I guess Nina's just going to play it safe for now. Warp in a big round of Zealots from the Warp Prism, and maybe send those in to harass once they find a chance to move in.
Yep, the main army is moving out as well. Nina, honestly, is in an amazing position. And as long as nothing goes terribly wrong, I don't see this ending in any other way than a Pro Tools victory here in game 1. JonSnow has a ludicrous amount of Ravages. Can we take a look at the natural of JonSnow? Like, that is so many Ravages. Which, I mean, it's a great unit, but eventually you're going to need something else than just Ravages, right?
Alrighty, all he needs is 24 corrosive vials. And yeah, okay, eventually he'll get some good hits.
Yeah, we didn't see it, excuse me, but there are a lot of corrosive vials just landed on the Phoenixes. So 5 Phoenixes just went down in the center of the map. While the main army of Nina is right now engaging. A couple of barriers activated immediately. This is actually a little bit tricky. The Ravager count is so freaking high. This Protoss army is about to get sandwiched. I wouldn't mind a recall from Nina. I think recall is the best play you can make here. Instead, going to sandwich with Zealot from the bottom. Well, that's a really good play as well. Amazing form. Wow, okay, that went so much better for Nina than I thought it would.
Yeah, even with all the Ravager corrosive vials landing on a lot of those Immortals, the majority of them still manage to survive, even with their shield set off. One Archon getting a little bit low. It is eventually going to end up falling over there, but there are more Archons on the way. More Immortals storming their way forward. Nina is feeling really, really aggressive right now as she moves closer and closer for JonSnow's army, takes out the remaining Ravagers, and takes game number 1.
Yeah, Zealots are one hell of a unit in those kind of scenarios. Like, Ravages are cool, but Ravages are normally cool because they have range and they have something in front of them to buffer, so they can just pick off Zealots one by one. If you're playing pure Ravager, and that's kind of what it was, I don't know what the Ravager count was at, but I feel like it was 28 or something, then 12 Zealots storming in out of nowhere and getting right on top of the Ravagers is actually insanely good for the Protoss. And yeah, Ravagers just attack a little bit too slow to then be able to survive that kind of DPS from the Zealots.
Yeah, and of course, we're talking about this, and we're kind of saying like, oh, you know, JonSnow going for all the Ravagers wasn't the right call. But at that point, I think we were both in agreement that JonSnow was already extremely far behind. You were saying it was a super all-in build. He was doing what he thought might bring him back, and obviously, Nina just responds correctly and doesn't end up really doing a whole lot.
You know, I know that JonSnow in the past has been a pretty excellent Hydra Ling Bane player in this matchup, just getting those 4 bases up and running, getting to 80 plus drones, and then just rolling in Banelings from every angle. And I feel that would have been a really good way to play Pillars of Gold, maybe with some Baneling drops later as well, if that one Phoenix that was out on the map at a certain point would have gone down. To go for that build, like, that's a build that I think is powerful on Avid Dream, obviously Submarine if we end up playing it. In the previous patch, I think of Nightshade, right? We've seen Laser and Lambo do those kind of builds very often. I personally don't like a build like that on Pillars of Gold. It's just, even with the creep highway, it just feels uncomfortable to me, and it takes a little too long for the queens to show up. And then on top of that, the fight at the third of the Protoss, often the queens have to go down a ramp, and that also allows for some force field magic, so to speak.
Which we literally saw in that game, so I can't disagree with you there. I wonder if it is just, again, the fact that JonSnow has shown that he's been said that he really doesn't like playing a lot of the late game PvZ right now, whether it be because it feels like he doesn't have as much time to really refine and practice his mechanics as much, or if it's just something about the late game that has not clicked for him. But regardless, our next map is going to be Eternal Empire. You feeling any kind of particular style on this map, or not really?
I'd love to see double Stargate out of Nina. We already saw a little bit of it on Pillars of Gold, but I think at that point the game was over. I'd love to see straight double Stargate. And of JonSnow, I'd honestly love to see him just play some Hydra Ling Bane. Maybe a safety Roach one, you know, to deal with any sort of an Adept Opener or an Archon drop, whatever it may be. A couple of safety Roaches, but then take that fort base at the Rich Vespian Geyser and give me some of that old school JonSnow magic, okay? It's 1 a.m. This is when I need it in my life, Robbie.
Yeah, poor JonSnow. I feel like he's just such a roach man these days. Whenever I see him play, it is just a lot of roaches. So we might be seeing a little bit more of that, but only time will tell as we get ready to move into game number 2 on Eternal Empire. JonSnow versus Nina. Last game for the North American side of the broadcast. We're going to be starting over here in the top right-hand side of the map, top of Team Exxon's very own Nina.
And in the bottom left side, we're looking at the main base. One of the old school players of the North American scene, as Zork representing Psystorm Gaming. It is JonSnow.
right. So, Roddy, I kind of feel like a lot of people like watching Nina's playstyle. I really enjoy watching Nina's playstyle. I feel like we didn't get to see as much of the really fun parts of it. We got to see maybe a little bit of that micro and everything for the end of the zealot flanks and everything. But I always feel like when Nina is able to kind of play a little bit more of her pace of game, where she's not just getting all in and defending, you get to see a lot of the really, really flashy plays. And that's what I'm hoping we get to see this game, is just Nina being able to play a bit more of a macro game and putting on some more of that pressure with more than just little Oracle harassment or something.
You're telling us you want Nina to open up with a Colossus drop for your entertainment.
I wouldn't mind a Colossus drop. I mean, I was okay with, an Archon drop into her patented 4 Warp Prism, 8 Archon, drop them on top of your opponent's Mutas style. But, I'll take that too. Real thing, by the way.
I believe it. I've watched the stream plenty of times to be aware that apparently anything is possible when you watch Nina play StarCraft on the North American server. Now, over here in the NA with money on the line, I'm not sure if you really want to get too fancy, too crazy, DreamHack Masters. But we'll see. I mean, Nina is up 1-0, so if she is feeling creative, maybe we'll see a cool build coming out of her in Game 2.
Yeah. On the faster side, we have a third base going up over here for JonSnow, since Nina not really going to be doing any kind of super duper early pushing with the probe around to try and block the hatch or anything in the natural. It's already down by the time she gets there, and then JonSnow just takes that fast third immediately afterwards. So nice start there for JonSnow to get a quick economic edge in the very beginning, but there's the Stargate being planted for Nina.
Stargate is just safe and solid in this matchup. Even though a lot of the Korean protoss are all about the adepts and a lot of the Europeans are all about the adepts right now as well, I think Stargate is still a very safe and solid way to play, and especially against JonSnow, who, I wouldn't be super shocked to see JonSnow just bust out a Link Flock. Those are the kind of builds that JonSnow has done in the past, or his super early Baneling bust. I know it sounds very newbie-ish, but with the execution of JonSnow, those builds do pack a punch, and they are kind of intimidating to go up against. But if you have a Stargate as an opener, you're just not really worried about any all-in.
Yeah, Oracle's just really, really covers so many options there. JonSnow taking some damage on some of these drones. Finally ends up losing one of them, but does get the Adept in exchange for it. So, okay trade there from both sides. First Oracle almost out as well. We'll see if it's going to be just another Robo and Twilight Council follow-up over here for Nina, or what?
I think a lot of these early game skirmishes is more about mental victories than anything else. Obviously, if a Reaper picks off a drone, that's a pretty big deal because that's super early in the game. But the first Adept already hits quite a bit later. I think as the Adept goes down, it's going to go down, but it gets the drone, you're like, yeah! If it doesn't get a single drone, you're like, man, I'm behind right now. This sucks. And it's obviously not that dramatic, right? Because that Adept is there to scout anyway. But it always feels good mentally to pick up and work a kill in the early game.
Yeah, I remember Nina has always been one of those super momentum-based players. When things are going well, she starts playing even better. One of my favorite examples is Peely Peely was saying, when he used to play Nina, he would say, if I am about to lose in a PvP and there's a big disruptor hit that's about to go off on my army, I do the pause quit before the disruptor shot goes off, because if I have to go to another game against her, I don't want her to feel even better. She'll just start playing even better. I'm like, that's a perfect example.
The Lynx actually showed up at a pretty cool time, I thought, but that Nexus went down right before they were there, so they had to settle for a single Adept kill. And that's obviously not that bad, but I think when you make those Lynx, you're always hoping to get lucky. You're hoping to pick off the probe that's trying to warp in that Nexus, because at that point you can easily get a 25 to 30 second delay on it. We see possible melee, by the way, being researched, and the Baneling nest going down, so I have the feeling we are going to see some Hydra Link Bane action coming out of JonSnow.
You getting your wish there, Roddy. JonSnow gonna listen to his man. And, we'll see when the Oracles start to poke on in. They do manage to get a handful of these drones. They also should have noticed the Baneling nest as they start to dive on forward and even get a little revelation that definitely confirms it.
Yep. Honestly, the Oracle play has been very good in both games. We saw the Oracles pick up 8 kills for Nina in game 1, while the Queens and Roaches were walking to the other side of the map. And so far, these Oracles are grabbing a couple of drones here and there as well. But more importantly, they're staying alive. And then that one Phoenix is taking away any map vision that these Overlords normally would provide. I do like what JonSnow is doing right now. If we can just pay attention to details over here, 1 a.m. Who cares? Take a look at the natural of JonSnow real quick. We can see there's now a couple of overlords a little bit further towards the north side. So they're kind of safe. They're on the top side of the sport crawler. They're kind of safe against that single Phoenix, but at least they will give the heads up if the oracles are coming. And one oracle did actually get picked off. Now the second oracle is taking quite some damage as well. But these are the little things that I think are important as a Zerg play, that even when there is that single Phoenix that's super annoying and is taking away your map vision, you can still get that 2-second heads up that oracles are heading towards your natural. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to know, it feels like, okay, JonSnow did just finally get out a big another round of drones, but I felt like he was sitting in the round of the 50s for a really long time. Sure, he's been getting up the 4th base and getting up the Hydraling Bane style and everything, +2 melee on the way, Baneling speed on the way. But it does feel like Nina's also had a lot of room to just get into her kind of ideal mid and late game. There's a Spire coming down in a very odd position, Roddy. I don't think I've ever seen a Spire planted at that location.
I'd be lying if I said I never saw it, but it's quite rare. I've seen somebody else actually try to put like 7 overlords on top of it, which is really funny because then it's really hard to identify that there is indeed a Spire being built underneath that. Well, could be a pretty awesome play. JonSnow firing up 11 more drones now. That 4th base about to finish up. Rich Vespian Geyser is going to be utilized immediately. I'm happy to see that. I get so upset when I see people have this base and then only a little bit later they take that gas. It's like, no, that gas should be your #1 priority. You're just buying yourself 3 drones out of nowhere, which is just awesome.
Okay, well, we're going to see a Ling coming in, scouting out the 4th base location as it's getting plopped on down. I wonder how many mutas is JonSnow really going to be able to make over here? Well, okay, he's just going to go for the push out right now and doesn't really have a whole lot of a bank for the Aspire to actually do a whole lot.
I think it's kind of a fake, but Nina's already picking up on it because now we see another Phoenix being produced. I think when you play Protoss and you're playing against a good Zerg player, and you just kind of survive, and you can always ask yourself, it's like, well, if things are too good to be true, they normally are. And if it's easy to survive against a good Zerg player like JonSnow, you know, there's no Banelings trying to blow up your High Templars, you're just able to get up to 4 bases, that must mean that either you're playing against the quickest Broodlord attack of all time, or it's Mutas, right? And more often than not, it's Mutas.
Indeed. Well, we are going to see just a lot more Zealots getting warped in over here. There are the mutas you were talking about finally being made, and just a lot of drones behind us, Roddy. It's not just the mutas. It's 91 drones with that 5th base finally being established over there. Well, JonSnow might need some of those drones because I think he's about to lose a few of them over at the 4th.
Yep, I mean, all the Hydras on the other side of the map. The Mutas are going to have to clean up these Zealots, but it takes a little while. So this is an excellent Zealot counterattack by Nina. I didn't really like the move out of the Hydras. Like, I understand trying to sell a game that's not really happening, right? It's like, well, here are my Hydras and Zerglings. You should be really worried. But that army was way too small to ever be taken seriously. On top of that, there were no Banelings in the mix at all, and that means that at home, you're always going to be very vulnerable against Zealots there. But I gotta say, JonSnow only losing 4 drones, that's not that big of a deal. What is a bigger deal is that +1 air weapons is on the way for Nina, and 2 Phoenixes at a time are being produced. I don't really know how mutas are supposed to win these kind of games.
Roddy, I'm really concerned because, you know, if it was just the 10 or so mutas that JonSnow had made, yeah, you know what? Okay, the double Stargate Phoenix, obviously it sucks to go up against and lose your mutas. But if you can find little bits and pieces of damage, you force a huge reaction from your opponent. JonSnow is doubling down on these mutas. He's making 4 more on top of the many that he's already got. I think the name of the game here is he's got to dive in, find the Stargates, and actually start doing damage and killing off Phoenix before they build into a big number.
Yep, or maybe distract Nina with a Baneling run by and then dive on top of the Phoenixes, right? Like, that's potential. There is potential for a play like that. Now, I gotta say, JonSnow is still doing other stuff as well, though. With his 84 drone economy, we see the infestation pit go down. We see the lurker den is now halfway down. It's kind of cool. I mean, this is an unusual way to play, but I kind of like it, especially if JonSnow is able to set up some 1-2 plays. Not just only fly around with the mutas, but maybe a Baneling run by and then use the mutas to get some proper damage done.
Yeah, oh boy. When Annie and Pulse Crystal, the Phoenix range upgrade completes, that is when suddenly all of these mutas will start disappearing as soon as the Phoenix find them. It is kind of there is no running from this army composition. The Banelings are starting to roll on in, and the Hydras are also starting to try and get some damage done, but oh my god, that ground army gets devastated. The Phoenix absolutely obliterating any mutas that get even remotely near them, especially with a shield battery overcharge. Oh, Roddy, this is just not going so well for JonSnow right now.
No, that position feels very fortified, right? There are cannons. Phoenix is getting a little ahead of themselves there for Nina, but any Impulse Crystals is close to finishing up. And I think the units lost resource step. It's even a little bit closer than what I thought it was, but it's not looking great, right? Like, it's a relatively short game, already almost 3,000 resources different. And then on top of that, Nina is heading towards a superior army composition. Yeah, I'm very worried for JonSnow. Maybe Lurker magic, though. The Lurkers are cool, and we don't see them very often.
Yeah, I could definitely see something magical happening over there. There's a lot of Immortals still out. I mean, those 5 Immortals can definitely pack a wallop, but we are getting to that late game situation where it's 7 Lurkers being made at a time, and if any more get added on, even 5 Immortals, Roddy, will start disappearing pretty quickly to that DPS.
Yeah. I gotta say, I thought this was going to be a very close best of 3. So far, it's not. In my opinion, Nina's just looking a lot better in both games. And I feel like JonSnow is kind of running into a wall and making the games perhaps a little more complicated than they have to be. He's still maxed out, JonSnow that is, and obviously still has money in the bank, and with a lot of Lurkers, magic is possible. But I feel that Nina can easily start heading into Carriers as well, and Carrier Disruptor, I mean, is literally the dream composition against any Zerg that plays Lurkers.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly JonSnow will do if he ends up having to go up against something like that. There are going to be Tempests added on first, which are another nice way to deal with the Lurkers in kind of the short term, but you might be seeing a big fight. There's Annie on Pulse Crystals really having a big effect. Storm's also coming out on top of all those Banelings, force building them out as well. All of the Banelings and Lings end up disappearing. Now the Phoenix can just lift the Lurkers up out of the ground. They're invalidated. They don't exist anymore. And that is going to be a full-on cleanup there for Nina. Suddenly that army supply, that whole supply count that JonSnow had in his favor for this whole game, not really going to be there.
Nina, her force fields have been so good. I have no idea how the Archon didn't break those force fields, by the way. I thought like, hey, JonSnow is going to get a little victory. The Banelings will connect with the High Templars. And nope, not even that. The wall of force fields goes up. And then I gotta say, I love the call by Nina to immediately fly forward and lift all those units as well. I don't think it was necessary, but hey, it was another massive victory for her. And she's just kind of running all over JonSnow in this series.
Absolutely. Now just pushing on to creep. Funny enough, I think it actually doesn't have a whole lot of detection over here to kill off the creep terminals. We're starting to notice now, but not sure if it's going to matter. Oh, moving through a very weird choke point, but finally the High Templar get through. They start storming the Hydras. They're going to start pushing things further and further back. The Viper's also getting taken out by the Phoenix. Parasitic Bomb is doing quite a bit of damage to the Phoenix, and it does seem like Nina's army is getting thinned out a bit, especially with no more Storm. Nina's starting to take some pretty decent losses here.
Yeah, that was actually a really good hold there by JonSnow, getting a good fight there. Obviously a very awkward position to fight. Hydras are chasing down a Tempest. JonSnow is not going to get a Tempest yet. That's awfully close to getting one though. Good cleanup indeed, especially because a lot of damage were done to the Phoenixes. But don't forget that Nina still has a very big bank for herself. I gotta say though, if you make too many Tempests, that's a good way to lose, because I'm just not a fan of that unit, especially in the very late game in this matchup. I understand they're good against Lurkers. You know, on paper, it's like, well, Lurkers have range, but Tempests have more range. But if the fight really gets forced upon you, then I feel like Tempests are always a bit awkward. They shoot so slow. The DPS is so underwhelming that I honestly think making Carriers would be a much better choice here.
How many Tempests is too many Tempests, Roddy?
1.
Wow, all right. Really not a fan of the Tempest.
I mean, I just gotta keep it real, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna see that JonSnow gets situated in a very tough spot to break for a big Zealot composition or any kind of army on the ground, and those Archons also going to have a hard time moving through kind of choke points against lurkers. I'm actually not too sure how Nina wants to engage this without just using the Tempest or something to try and take out these lurkers and lift them up with the Phoenix. That's going to be the game plan. Blinding Cloud does come out on top of some of the Immortals, but most of them are able to move through. It's just getting awkward, though. Most of the Phoenix died at the Parasitic Bomb, and JonSnow is closing the gap between the Hydras and the Tempest.
I mean, there's still a lot of money in the bank for Nina, so a lot of Zealots can get wiped in, and we do have Zealots counterattacking as well on the other side of the map. These Tempests are just like kind of stuck right now, and somehow they're outmaneuvering the Zerg army at this point, which is just kind of hilarious. I can't believe they survived, which probably is bad news for Nina. They take up a lot of supply, Robbie. They take up a lot.
They do. You're doing a great job of not selling me on the Tempest.
Well, Nina still has an amazing economy. JonSnow obviously does not, so Nina is still winning. With static defenses, the Tempest do become a little bit better, actually. There's a couple of cannons here. There is a super battery as well. A couple of nice feedbacks on the Vipers, and I actually think just Zealots can win the game here for Nina.
Well, with the 2K mineral bank, that might be what Nina has to make for a little bit. And there's a lot of Zealots being worked on the right-hand side, ready to go in for another hatchery. Funny enough, might walk past the bottom right-hand hatchery and head straight over to that bottom center one instead. But Nina realizing it, just going to split up those units and maybe snap off a few more drones. JonSnow definitely falling from that 91 drone count from earlier on in the game.
JonSnow is now struggling to max out, and it's just more and more Hydras being walked in, and Hydras are gonna do all right against just Zealots or just Tempest, but there is no answer against Storm at this point. Most of the lurkers have gone down. Only 2 lurkers are out on the map. It's 32 Hydras. There are no Banelings anymore. So at this point, it basically comes down to how many Storms are available. Well, we've got 5 High Templars out on the map. On top of that, a lot of static defenses as well. I don't see how pure Hydra ever breaks the Protoss army here. That is so, well, sophisticated as the army of Nina is.
Yeah, especially when those carriers start getting added in higher numbers, this is going to become a feeling impossible feeling game for JonSnow. Now, we do still have those Tempests whittling away at this army. I'm starting to really see why JonSnow does not like his late game ZVP, because I think he is having a hard time feeling like he knows exactly where to transition against this army.
Yeah, but it's mostly because of the mutas, right? We had a massive investment in mutas, and the mutas just didn't really pay off. Not a good feedback by Nina. Nina, her spellcasting in this series has honestly been very impressive. All the feedbacks land, the storms have been great. The force fields have really been saving games and saving key units. That's what I'm taking away of this best of 3. I mean, JonSnow is hanging in there, but it's pure Hydras against unlimited amounts of High Templars. Nina has macro, or her macro as well. It's just kind of consuming the map at this point.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It looks like another Immortal is going to be caught over here. The Hydras diving in on top of one of the carriers. I mean, this is kind of do or die right now for JonSnow to make something happen with his army. Is starting to move on forward, taking out a lot of the interceptors as well, but the Hydra count on the bottom left is starting to wear a little bit thin. The Hydra count on the right-hand side still staying strong, though, and I don't really see any more storms coming on out. A carrier ends up falling. The cannons and the shield batteries with the Tempest, though, look like they're going to be enough to hold strong. JonSnow loses a lot of his army there again, and also lost even more drones on that bottom center and bottom right-hand side.
You know, I'm a massive hater of the Tempest, but I gotta say, like, if you're facing just Hydras, and obviously the Vipers got feedback over and over again, the Tempest have been actually able to get some good shots off, and because of their super big range, or long range rather, it's hard for Hydras to get in reach. But it's just that this is not really a fair game, where Nina is so much richer than JonSnow. JonSnow is going to try one more time. A few more Vipers are on the way as well. The Lurkers are going to be annoying, but the Tempests are obviously very safe here against the Hydras. But we're looking at a super advanced Protoss army against a relatively basic Zerg army.
And it's really just been showing for the last 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes at this point, as we're starting to see Nina is now up almost 50 supply, and it's a Protoss player ahead in supply with a very cost-efficient army versus a Zerg player that's still just on that lower tech Hydra army with a few lurkers mixed in. Storms are going to hurt over here as a lot of the Hydras also get softened up. JonSnow has not been able to establish a base in the bottom right for such a long time. He's trying to take this more forward base where his Hydras have been sitting for a long time, but I don't know if this is going to go that much better with the Tempest and the High Templars and the Zealots just constantly pushing him back.
Yeah. I'd be worried if Nina would be too passive and really let JonSnow build up a proper army again. But JonSnow just keeps being aggressive of relatively low drone counts, so that's not really something to be super worried about. And on top of that, Nina is still doing a really good job at sending the occasional Zealot run by in. They just keep on coming. Nina is obviously super rich, so even if some of these Zealot run bys are not super successful, it's always going to be okay. If you're outmining your opponent for, well, basically 7 minutes straight at this point, and currently with 2,000 minerals a minute more, I think you can do whatever the hell you want with your Zealots. GG gets called as the carriers and Temp